today we're going to talk about lists and looping. Both are things that will really make your life easier as a programmer, and something that will be useful not just with Python but in lots of languages. Trey is going to do, for those of you that weren't here for the first session, we're using an interactive Python interpreter. If you have a Mac, you could go into your applications and bring up terminal and then type Python on the command line, and that'll put you into the Python interpreter, where there are 3 chevrons, which was something I learned this morning. Those are the little arrow thingies. And for those of you that are on Windows or Linux, well, more Windows, Linux, I'm assuming if you're using Linux, you know how to get a command line. And if you go to that website called Revelit, it will have a similar interface as Trey has. If you don't have a laptop, no problem, because we're going to put the materials up on the San Diego Python website, and a link as well on the PyLadies website.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
If you do plan to use this at this website, their online little app, you do not have to include the 3 chevrons. I had just found out from another attendee that she was including the 3 chevrons, which was giving her error after error.
Yes, that would do that.
Yeah, so I think there's one chevron prompt. So you just type it in. Just type in print or whatever Trey is typing at his prompt. In like manner, you don't have to include the 3 chevrons. It's just there. There's one by default. Okay?
And then, as Rise mentioned when she was introducing herself, the Boston Python workshop and Jessica McKellar's teaching of that workshop is online as a YouTube video, so it's a good thing to watch and supplement what we're going to talk about as well. And it's a really good overview of the basics of Python. Bless you.
What was her name? Jessica what?
Jessica McKellar, MC.
Yeah.
And the end of the links that we'll do for the Meetup group and stuff, it'll have a link to that video
okay.
as well.
Thank you.
But if you Google Jessica McKellar and Python, you'll get any number of things. Oh, and there's Jessica. Okay, so in Python, if we want to print something, we type the function print and a string that follows. And I think we're going to dive into starting a list. But first, let's review. Last session, we talked about numbers, strings, variables, making choices with Python, using less than, greater than, equal to, not equal to, in a string, whether something's in it or not, using if and else, and elif if we're trying to make a program do different actions based on whether perhaps a brother is older than a sister, or the same age, or younger. I was making sure you weren't writing stuff about me. No. Okay, so lists. Just like your grocery list or your to-do list, which hopefully isn't running off the edge of the page. There are lists in Python, and a list in Python is just a collection of items. And in this list that Trey just typed up, your list is a variable, and the equal sign, and we know it's a list because of the square brackets. And what we've got inside the list is 3 strings, A, B, and C. And we can confirm that, in fact, it's a list. Say we were confused and we didn't know what it was when we saw the word your list. So type is a function in Python that will return what data type a variable is, or an object or a number or string is. So when we hit enter, the type is in fact a list. And for those of you that weren't at the beginning, we know it's a function because of the parens around the input, which is your list, and then type is the function name. Just like with strings, lists can have a length. And the length of a list is actually the number of items on the list, which makes sense, right? So in this case, our list has 3 items. Also like strings, remember with strings we did like is E in hello? So we're doing a check to see if an element is within the string, and we get the Boolean true back. We can also do that in a list. So one of our list items is A, and you can type in your list, and if A is in fact in your list, it would return true. If we did X in your list, we should get false because it is in fact not one of the items in our list. Now, something about lists is that they're ordered. So just like you've got like a prioritized to-do list, lists are ordered. And so the way we would access an individual item in a list is we would type your list and then a bracket, and then we would put an item number in it. So let's say we wanted to get the leftmost item, which is the A. We would put 0 inside of the brackets, which, when you hit enter, you'll see it's in fact A, which is a little weird because it's a little counterintuitive that you would start with 0. And in fact, many programming languages, when this number here is called an index, and the index typically starts with 0, and it has to do with how memory was laid out in hardware early on. And it actually makes a lot of sense. It's a little weird at first, but so for example, if we did your list 1, we would get which item?
B.
B. Your list 2, we would get C. Now, what if we we were confused, or somebody else was programming with us, and they tried to get your list indexed item 3? What do you think Python's going to do? Error. So, for those of you that were here before, the traceback or errors, they're not scary. They happen quite frequently, and all you do is you read them from the bottom up, because the bottom line really gives you the most information about what you could do to fix it, or what the error is. So it's saying index error, list index out of range. So in this case, since our 3 does not correspond to any item on our list, you would get an error. So, pretty readable traceback. And now what if you want to add an item to the list? Python gives you a really easy way of doing that by using the function append. So we would say your list name, the name of the list. Are we doing names? You're doing your list.
Your list.
Your list. And append tells Python, okay, I'm going to add it to the end of the list, and then you're going to put in the value that you want appended to the list. So let's, to make things simple, we'll put D on it.
Don't you put a bracket, not a parenthesis? No?
Ah, good question. Question was, do you use brackets or not parentheses? If the reason you're using the parens here is that append is a function.
Oh, that makes sense, right.
So, but hold that thought, because we could use brackets when we want to access it. So let's hit that, And now if we do your list bracket item 3 or index number 3, we would get D. So that's a great question, and probably an error that is frequently done. Just like a string, we can use len to get the length of a list. And len is also a function because we've got the parens. And Python will tell us that we in fact have 4 items in the list. Now,
I'm sorry, that was a great question, but I'm not quite sure I understand when you should use the parentheses and when the brackets. I know there's a difference,
Okay.
obviously, but
the brackets really indicate to a user that, I'm gonna tie my shoe while I talk because this way I won't fall flat on my face, although that might be entertaining. The brackets signify that it's a list. So what's inside the brackets are either elements of the list or an index to a list item. Now, the reason that there's parens after append, well, let's see what Python does if we did brackets. Because I don't actually know what it does. But append is a function of a list. Like a list has certain functions. And the parens signify that we're using the function append to add a D to the list. And when we use the brackets, what you get is a traceback that says built-in function or method has no attribute get item. So the brackets, in fact, correspond to get item. And because a list doesn't have that in Python's little brain, you can't do it that way. Does that make more sense? And the more you play with it, the more sense it makes.
It's almost like a function is a verb,
Yeah.
and a list is an object or something.
okay, thank you.
Yes. And we'll keep coming back to it. So this is good. Ask those questions, don't just sit with them. Ask them. All right, so. Sorry, I'm just reading my own notes, which is not all that.
I see it. So, do you mind? if I-
Go for it.
Okay, so in this next part, like the questions that you guys are asking, basically, this goes back to Jessica, by the way, that little snippet.
Yeah.
You're looking at the same thing, okay. That if you don't know something, you know, a great suggestion would be you Google for it. And so in like manner, you know, what we did up there was we basically said, well, what if we do put brackets as opposed to parentheses? What are we going to see? And so when Trey hit the enter, we got this basically a message saying, hey, you know, this doesn't have the built-in method append, you know, it doesn't have a get item. So I guess that those brackets actually kind of indicated there's a getter. It points to a location in a list, if that makes sense. And the index is the location.
Of the element in the list.
Thank you. And so, going back to this, so, you know, if, let's say you did hit the enter and it just didn't bring up anything, well, you want to Google for it, basically. So, that's...
Yeah, and in addition to Googling, the Python documentation is all at python.org, very accessible. You can also type help and get the built-in help function. So there's different ways of doing that. And or Stack Overflow or other places, phone a friend, jump on an IRC channel like San Diego Python, and where you can ask questions of other people. And if you don't know what an IRC channel is, it's basically like an old school way we used to do chat, which is pretty much all text-based. Okay, so how would we create an empty list? So let's say we do her list. And anybody have a guess as to how to make an empty list? Yeah.
Empty brackets.
Empty brackets? That seems like a good guess to me, so let's try it.
How about with quotes in there?
with quotes in there. Ah, we're gonna do her way first, and then we're gonna do that way because I kind of like it. Yes. Okay, so let's do the length of both of them. Length of her list should be 0, which is what indicates it's an empty list. Ah, another list.
Can you print it?
Print another list. Okay, so what the brackets are is basically you're sending like an empty string, but to the list, that empty string is in fact an item, which is why we get a length of 1, which is kind of cool. Nobody's asked that. I like it. Okay. Say we want to replace items in the list. So we're going to start a cheesy Bananarama rock band, whatever. Those of you that were here earlier know how much I love Bananarama and the 80s and not. But, you know, don't want to offend anybody, so I'm going to go with the 80s. And let's say we start off with 2 people in the rock band. Were they in a rock band? I don't even know. Let's say Alice and Amy. So we're going to set names. Our first element in the list is Alice. Second item is Amy. And let's just do the length just so we're convinced that there are in fact 2 items in it. But, you know, we're not getting the audience that we really want to our concerts. And thinking that maybe it's time to add a drummer. So we're going to add Adam to our list of people in the band. And Adam's going to be the drummer. So we're going to use the append function with the parens and Adam's name. When we hit enter, and if we print out names, you'll see that in fact now we have 3 elements. Adam has been added to our band. Ticket sales are coming up a little bit. But, oh my goodness, Alice just decided to go solo. And so we need to replace her. And Jimmy's got a pretty good voice, so we're going to add Jimmy in Alice's place. So how would we do that? Well, remember, lists are ordered, and remember that the index starts with 0, so we've got 0, 1, 2. So names 0 should be Alice. And if we want to replace Alice with Jimmy, we would set names 0 to the string Jimmy by using the equal assignment operator. And if our band has any luck, we will now have Jimmy, Amy, Adam in our band. And in fact, we do, which is cool. So Alice is going off, she's on like American Idol or something, you know, doing her thing. And now let's replace Adam with a cool new chick drummer, Rachel. So how would we replace Adam with Rachel?
Names 2 equals Rachel.
2 equals Rachel?
Names 2.
Names 2 equals Rachel. I like it. Let's try it.
Rachel.
Nice. And, okay, so now we got a new band. We're going to call it JAR because we got Jimmy, Amy, Rachel, and I'm not very creative, so I'm going to just take the first initial. So our band is JAR, which we probably could set to a variable band, just because I'm being silly. And, okay, so we have names, second item as Rachel. How is that different from names, second item, equals Rachel? And for those of you that were here earlier, the 2 equal signs was is equal to. So we're doing a comparison. So here we're saying, is names item 2 equals Rachel? And we would expect Python to return true, because in fact it is. If we did names 2 equals Adam, is equal to Adam, we should get false, because Adam has gone off and Rachel is now our cool chick drummer. All right, so, okay, so how would we get the last item in the list? Because sometimes we want to know who the last item is. And we know we can get the length of the list by using len and putting the list name inside. So now we know there's 3 items in the list. So to get the very last item, we could try taking the length of the list minus 1, which would give us the second item. And I just want to show that that in fact would give you the second. Now if you did names and then in brackets, length of names minus 1, which basically this evaluates to names bracket 2, and we should in fact get the last item of the list. Now, fortunately, Python, because it loves its programmers, the programmers that developed Python tried to make things as easy as possible. There's a simpler way to get the last number on the list, and you can use negative numbers to count backwards from the end of the list. So if we do names bracket minus 1, it should give us the last item. If we did names bracket minus 3, we should get something, which would in fact be the third from the last item on the list. So Rachel would be minus 1, Amy minus 2, Jimmy minus 3, which is kind of a cool way of getting the last item, and Python's just doing the math for us. There's not really any magic in what it's doing. We can do the same thing for strings. So say we did name equals my name, Carol. Name of 0 item of name should give us the letter C, which hopefully it does, and it does, cool. So say I wanted to get the last letter in my name, I could do name minus 1. And this comes in handy when you're working with strings and data that people have inputted, or and you want to kind of like check some things or modify some things. So let's do a real quick review of lists. And since the names and band is getting old, we're going to switch to, all right, fruits. Fruits. I was trying to think of something different, but fruits. So we're going to put 3 fruits in our list to start with. And we know, in fact, it's 3 fruits in the list because Python's telling us that, but we can also do the length. You use the square brackets to get an individual item from the list. So in this case, fruits of 0 would give us the first item. Fruits of negative 1 would give us the last item in the list. We can also replace the food in the list by doing fruit in the list by doing an assignment. So somebody tell me their favorite fruit.
Pear.
Pear. And now if we print fruits, we in fact get pears, and you can see the list now has pears, bananas, and oranges. We can use append to add a fruit to the end of the list. So fruit. Favorite fruit. or least favorite fruit, it doesn't matter.
Avocado.
Apple.
Apple, all right. We got an apple lover. So we do fruits append, which is a function because of the parens, and we're gonna add apples to our list. So now our fruit basket has pears, bananas, oranges, and apples. And the length of our list is in fact 4. Yeah,
Is there a way to add something if you don't want it at the end? I mean, append always seems to add something to the very end. If you wanted them, in alphabetical order or whatever, is there a way to add something in the middle?
yes. And my fabulous assistant will use the Google to figure out how to add stuff in the middle of a list in Python. Because quite honestly, I have not a clue.
Can you append from 1 to 2 with your thing append?
Yes, actually Python has something called slicing, but insert is a function. So let's do help list insert. Insert says we're gonna insert an item on the list right before index something. So let's go back to our fruits. And since you asked the fabulous question, what's your favorite fruit?
Kiwi.
Kiwi. And where would you like kiwi in the list?
Between bananas and oranges.
Between bananas and oranges. So we want kiwi to come before oranges, and oranges is got index number 2. So we're gonna do fruits insert 2, because that's gonna say we want it before 2, comma, kiwis. And if we're lucky and we've done it correctly, yay! Okay, so great question, and now we've all learned something new. Okay, now what if we wanted, in the same vein as that, check if kiwis are in our list? We would use kiwis in fruits, and it would return true. Say we wanted to get more than one item out of the list. And Python actually has a pretty cool range syntax for that. And it takes the list name with a bracket, and then the syntax is actually the element, first element that you'd like, a colon, and then the final element that you want. So let's say 0:2. Oh, I totally went off script, didn't I? Sorry.
No, you didn't. You're fine.
I'm good?
You're
Okay.
good. You're good.
And that should return pears, bananas, and, you're gonna hit enter?
Thank you.
Thank you. So pears, bananas, and that's it. What on earth just happened? Very common confusion when you're initially working with lists. The second number is up to, but not including the element. So if we did fruits 0:3, we would then get pears, bananas, and kiwis, but we would not in fact get oranges. You can also type shorthand, because Python knows that if you leave an item before or after the colon empty, it's implicit. And so if we did fruits 2, Python knows that we want the start of the list. And we should get what we got above when we had fruits 0:2. You can also leave off the item number to the right of the colon. So we could do fruits, let's say item 2 to colon and bracket. So that's going to give you to the end of the list, from item 2 to the end. And remember, kiwis 0, 1, 2, and then it gives you up to and including the last item of the list, which really confused me at the start. So it's kind of a good thing to maybe make a cheat sheet sometimes, or keep in mind. You can also leave off both the sides of the colon, which is kind of cool. And that should give us everything. Are we doing a copy of the list? No, okay. So we're jumping down to names again? Yeah, okay. All right, any questions so far on the list?
Is there any difference between just fruits and hitting enter in fruits and then this box with the colon in the middle? Is it returning the same thing?
Practically, no. Technically, maybe. But we'll leave that. Good question. Yeah.
So if you have this, like the fruits, for example, and I want to address just, but I saw that if you have a string, you can address each letter on the string, right? If I want to address like the E in pairs, how do I do that?
Ah,
Is square and square? Or?
yeah. So if we wanted to address, let's say, the E in pairs, fruits 0 will give us pairs. Fruits 0, square bracket 1, hopefully will give us the E, or you can fire it. So very good.
And also that help when you did help, insert that thing you made. What's the syntax for help?
You type help, and in parens, the statement that you're trying to learn more about. So
I just wanted to know about the function insert.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
why
so
do I have to do fruits?
I don't, well,
Just insert? Oh,
I think you can do a generic list, and it should, yeah.
yeah.
So Python's kind of nice that way. You can do the name of the data or the actual data when you're doing help. Okay, so any more questions on lists before we dive into loops? Are we on time? We good for a second? Okay, so loops is when you want to do something over and over again. And you don't want to type it 20, 30 times in your program because that's annoying and inefficient. So if we did for each name, well, let's set up a list called names, and I'll let Trey fill in 5 different names. Six different names. 7 different names. If we're not sure how long our list was, we use len, names. Okay, we've got 6 now. Cool. So say we want to print each of the names. Well, one way we could do it, and if I was feeling cruel, I would make Trey do 6 print statements. Print 0, print 1, print 2, print 3. But there's an easier way. And the easier way is using a for loop. And so we could say for name in names, and then we use a colon, and the colon lets us do a multi-line statement. And Python is very picky when you have multi-lines about spacing. So we're going to space over 4 spaces. And then we're just going to type print name. We're gonna hit enter once. Now, so Python, and then we're gonna hit enter a second time, so Python knows, go ahead, execute the 2 lines of code. And it prints out each of the names.
I have a question on that. So does that mean you have to pluralize all of your list names?
Excellent question. I think we planted him with the script ahead of time.
Oh, right.
So he asked, do we have to type for name in plural names? And in fact, no, we don't. We could do for X in names, colon, print, space over 4, print names, print X. And in fact, it does print those names. And let's just make sure that, there's nothing funky about the letter X. So let's do for first name in names, print first name. And I finally got it right.
And you can name your list anything you want.
Right.
So she named her list names, because there's X number of names. A list of names.
Okay, so say we want to get a little more fancy, more complicated, we could do for first name in names, print hello, space over 4, print hello, and then let's concatenate, which means add, smush together multiple strings. So we're going to add hello first name, and Trey very nicely for us put in a space after the O in hello so that it doesn't smush the name right up against the O in hello. And if we hit enter now, we in fact get hello Alice, hello Bob, hello Carol, hello Race, hello Alan, hello Trey. Kendall got locked off the list. If we wanted to add him to the list now, we could do names, append, Kendall. Kendall, you out?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't want to be left out.
So now we have 7 items in the list. If we do for first name and names and we do the same thing, print hello plus first name, we should get, in fact, everybody's name, including Kendall's, now printed out. Okay, are we doing the vowels? Yeah. Okay,
Question.
Yeah.
How do you delete elements is there right?
excuse me?
If I want to delete one element in there, right, just delete it and actually make it shorter, right?
If you want to delete an element and make it shorter, anybody got any guesses?
I tried putting just empty brackets, say first element equals empty, and it just did that. Oh, maybe that worked.
I like it. She's already solving her own problem. One way to do it is to slice the list, and but there's got to be a function you can do with an element.
Yeah.
Del, D-E-L. So let's go back to our Python. Say we wanted to get rid of me, so that you don't have to hear me speak any longer. If we did del names 2, or del names Carol, should both work. No. Must be integer, not string. All right, so del names Carol does not work. You're stuck with me 30 seconds longer. And now, in fact, I've been deleted, which means Trey and Rise can now present. No. Say we want to insert me back because they really don't want to present. They would use the insert function that we did before. And remember, insert 2 is the element that you wish to insert it before.
At.
Would there be,
Before.
Oh, sorry, yes.
would there
It
possibly,
becomes a,
It becomes
But
at.
it becomes that, correct.
Yes.
would there possibly be a different function that would allow you to say, delete names and quote Carol instead of, because in this case, obviously you have to know where it is in the list. It's tougher.
Are you dealing with dictionaries then?
Yeah, okay, so the short, simple answer is, I don't know if there is or is not. You could certainly, as a programmer, write a function that did exactly that. And if I were doing it, what I would do is I would go into the documentation, pull up list, scan down all the different functions that list provides, and then see if there was something that worked. And Rise's point, dictionary is another data type structure, another collection. Perhaps a different collection would work better.
It seems more practical to be able to do it that way.
Yeah, and that's part of what, as you're learning a language, I use multiple languages, of which Python is one. And I am horrible at memorizing things, so I have cheat sheets.
Google.
Yay, he removed me.
So there's no shame in not knowing something. I mean, that's most of programming is today. So
Cool.
go to Google and type in.
Because there's no way you're going to remember everything.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no way.
Yeah.
So what I do is,
It's true for me.
so I actually take advantage of Chrome, and you might use Firefox or whatever browser, and I make bookmarks. And so I divide it between, so like JavaScript or now Python, there's a bookmark and it's just like syntax. So that there's like pages that just list what they do. For example, jQuery has documentation and examples, and you can try it. So I just have them all in a folder, so when I'm actually trying to do something, I can just go back and kind of reference what it is.
Yeah, cool.
And then there's also, like she was showing Rebel it, just to try out your pieces of logic to see what you can get. Now,
Sure.
that brings me to a question. How do you console log? I'm using JavaScript kind of thing,
Yes.
but how do you console log when you're trying to see the results? Like, there's the error, but how do you debug? Is that too advanced? Maybe I should wait till third time.
It's a good question. You can, depending on the editor or terminal you're using, you can save the screen. Typically, if you're gonna you wouldn't necessarily use the interactive editor for doing programs where you wanted some persistence of data, or you would then move to a file. So
You don't usually run Python inside the browser. It's just
But there are a number of debugging tools that we talk about all
Yeah.
the time. So when you're dealing with files like a Python file, a .py file, and you're running it, you're executing it, you can actually import am I getting to?
yes.
Stop me if I.
Why don't, you know what, just
That's
so
what
we
I said,
get
maybe we
through
could set it for 3.
all the looping,
Yeah.
hold that question, we can answer it in the shift of classes. Okay.
Sorry, last question.
Yeah.
Doesn't remove every, like if your name is twice in the array, it doesn't remove all the columns.
Yes, correct,
Just the first one you find.
yes.
Okay.
Okay, so let's take this and say we want, of our list, we only want the names that start with a vowel. So how could we do this? So we know we need to get a name and get the first character in the string, which we kind of learned about a little bit ago. And, okay, so you're just like way ahead of me. Okay,
The Ruby guys are right outside.
Yeah,
we've got 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
I think you wait. You know what, I'm gonna table this example because it's a lot of typing.
Right.
And show you that, because we've done quite a bit of lists and strings and looping, but I want you to also see that you can use looping and lists with numbers. So say you have a price list,
Yeah.
and so prices equals, and you put multiple elements into our list, or items into our list. And we want to do, let's say, a running total of something, which is something that, you know, frequently people do with shopping carts and things. So, can we call it running total? Or are we going to call it, the total's fine. Equals 0, so we're going to start it off by initializing it to 0. And then we're going to do a for loop, and we're going to do for, let's say, item price in prices. And then we're going to do the running total equals the running total plus item price, which might look a little weird, but Python, what it does is it's evaluating running total plus item price first, and then assigning it to running total, so updating. So in fact, if we run the for loop, and we type out what running total is now, it is in fact has added all 4 of our items. Now, it would be kind of annoying to do a for loop each time you wanted just to sum a list. So Python gives us a function sum that if we sum all the prices of the list, it should give us the same number, which in fact it does. And so really numbers work the same way as strings. Strings are a little more probably complicated, which is why we started with them. And your list could combine numbers and strings too. So, but we're not going to do an example on that. But any questions on looping, lists, generic Python questions? Okay.
I got a generic question for you. Since you're doing such a nice job here.
But, thank you.
Yeah, you really are. I'd really like to learn Python.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations for courses in town that are live as opposed to online?
Live.
Live,
In
Live.
person.
in
Okay.
person.
Well, one thing we're going to do is later this summer or early fall, we're going to do a workshop like the Boston Python workshop. Thank you, Trey. And where we will walk people through. We've done things like test-driven development with Python, and we do run workshops. Also, the study group is a fabulous option for, we've got a number of different tutorials, and it seems to have worked really well. People not only are learning Python, but they're learning web stuff, or they're learning like scientific computing or data analysis with Python, because Python can be used in a lot of ways. I'm actually not a web developer. I'm more a sciencey numbers geek. And so the short answer is that's probably the easiest and least expensive way to do it. There are people in our study groups that have used things like Coursera or Codecademy or different online classes, and then they supplement it with the study group. What we're learning from the people that have done some of the things like Coursera is it's very good at teaching you the syntax of the language. It's not as good at teaching you the practical ways of using the language or the tools with which you would use the language, because everything's in that kind of like simulated window. So things like checking out source code from a source control system like Git or Mercurial or something, it doesn't do that. It doesn't really talk to editors or how to set up your environment so that you can be efficient while you're programming, which is really helpful to learn, and I think that's a lot easier to learn when there's people that you can ask one-on-one questions to who are using it on a regular basis.
Yeah, I would stress the one-to-one. The Saturday workshop is great not only because it's live people, but you often get one-to-one help.
Yeah.
But, I mean, certainly our websites have a number of different tutorials that we've kind of had success with, or people have had success with. That's a good place to start. I had mentioned before python.org or pyvideo.org.
And I have one that,
Yeah.
so there's also, it's called pluralsight.com. Plural, so PL, like plural, PLURAL, site, SIGHT. It's a very good online, I guess, course, but it's fundamentals. So you'll get the fundamentals, but you get more in depth of the fundamentals. So even when you're in the workshop, if you're practicing that while you're doing that, you can, for me, I seem to catch on faster because then I'm real world practicing and I'm going back to the fundamentals.
Thank you, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
And the other thing about learning something, you know, each of us have a little bit different learning style.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's important to kind of take that into account when you're kind of trying to learn something, because if it doesn't go in the way that you actually learn, it's a lot of frustration and wasted time. So
That's great.
I want to thank you guys all for being here. Hopefully you learned a little bit of something about Python, and that my voice was not too annoying. And we hope to see some of you at either a San Diego Python meetup or a PyLadies meetup, or just online. I know it's hard sometimes to get out to a meetup. There are instructions on the San Diego Python website as well as the PyLadies website on how to access us on IRC and ask us questions in the meetup.